Welcome to another of our conversations with me, Nikki.
And I'm Scylla.
This has been a year of great uncertainty, of anxiety for many, of disconnection and huge change as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And much of that has to do with changes to people's working lives. Many people on furlough, many working remotely from home, some facing redundancy, many in frontline and stressful working situations where they're at greater risk of catching the virus. And these circumstances have put new challenges and huge pressures on many, many people. Today, we are talking with someone whose expertise, among other things, is in change, in challenge, communication, leadership development, and well-being, particularly in the workplace. Dr. Rebecca Newton is an organizational psychologist who spent 2 decades coaching and advising leaders and teams on organizational change. She's the founder and the CEO of Coach Advisor, and in her work she's included helping leaders from Coca-Cola, from Nike, from Microsoft. And her first book was published last year, and it's called Authentic Gravitas: Who Stands Out and Why?
And we want to welcome Rebecca today. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, which we're really excited because we're excited about what we're going to be covering. It's so topical right now in particularly these circumstances that we're in. But before we get going on that, it would be just wonderful to hear a little bit about how this all started for you. I know that you are from Australia, from Sydney, but you've been living in the UK for quite a number of years now. But tell us, what led to you becoming and pursuing a career in being an educational psychologist, an executive coach? Where did the story start?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to spend this time with you. These are topics I'm really passionate about. Where did it start? If I'm really honest, when I was choosing, when I was kind of in my late teens and choosing what I wanted to study at university, I thought psychology, a career out of talking. Yes. But I had other kind of career options and just felt pulled. I love and respect the work that is done in psychology and in business, and I'm really passionate about helping people to find ways to bring their best self to work and to have the impact that they want to have on other people. So that's really what my journey is about. And it spans a different range of industries and all different kinds of people. But I'm just very passionate about helping people to kind of bring their best self to work.
Oh, and so you really are in the people business, perhaps more than anybody else I've met, which is wonderful.
Well, not more than you, maybe.
I say we are definitely in the people. Yeah. Now, you've brought out, as Nikki said, this book published last year, called Authentic Gravitas. Now, I think you must correct me if I'm wrong about this, but one of the main overarching sort of themes in that book is that gravitas is not something that you just happen to be born with by luck, by chance, but something that can be developed. Everybody can develop this. And I'd love for you to just perhaps define gravitas a bit more and kind of fill us in on what that really covers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we talk about gravitas, we often look at other people and we think, wow, they have such gravitas. And what we mean by that is that their ideas are taken seriously, their words carry weight, they seem to make this impact and be valued. And I guess it's easy to look at other people and to think that they have this. And the book came about because I've been coaching for close to 2 decades now, and it's such a privilege to have people confide in what their greatest challenges and concerns are, and their goals and their aspirations. And so often people would say to me, Rebecca, I really need. I need more gravitas. And they would kind of whisper it as if it's something that they shouldn't want, or it's mostly that it's unattainable for them. And I'm just not like that. And hence why the book is called Authentic Gravitas, because in all the research that we did, and I say we because there's a team of us, of people, contributing and helping. And this, in the book, I draw on so much research from other people's work as well that's been done. And what we found in the research is that there isn't a mold, right? In terms of being someone who makes a positive difference, is valued by other people for the work that they do, for the contribution that they make. There is no one right way of doing this in work. There's not a mold of leader really gravitas here, we talk about the ability to influence beyond hierarchy. So, I'm a big believer in being respectful of people in leadership positions, but I know that people can lead and influence and make a positive difference wherever they are in an organization and wherever they are in a team. And so it's about, regardless of where you are in your ecosystem of work, to how can you make that positive difference that you want to make and be valued for the work that you do. And how can you do that and still be yourself? So how can you have gravitas and have that sense of, I still feel like me? Because authenticity is so important. It can be misunderstood, but, actually it's about understanding how you think, how you feel, and what you value, what really matters to you, and being able to outwork that in your environment. And one of the reasons it's so important for us right now is that authenticity is actually, some of the research suggests that it's one of the strongest predictors of well-being. So where people feel that they can be themselves and they're bringing their best self and outworking their values in the environments, the different environments they operate in, that really impacts our actual physical well-being. And that's remarkable.
Thank you. Well, we know your book is already proving really helpful to many, many people. In terms of the workplace and mental health, this season has put huge strain on people, whether, as I said earlier, through being furloughed or facing redundancy or concern about whether their business will survive. What's been your sort of observations about the effect of this time on people's mental health, and how do people develop more resilience?
Yeah, so that's a big question. In terms of for the first part, in terms of how just observations that I've seen and what the research is showing coming out, it's exactly what you said, which is, I see two trends. Obviously, the pandemic is impacting individuals and businesses in very different ways. And so we can't just, think that it's impacting us all the same. People's experiences are so different in this. Two things that I do see as being fairly consistent trends amongst, amongst our clients is that there is, unsurprisingly, there's great uncertainty and there is great pressure, the increase of pressure. So regardless of whether people, some organizations are doing well because they happen to be, in an industry that is particularly needed as a result of this, and a huge number are struggling. And it was devastating to see the impact on businesses, on leaders, on teams, on families. So people are experiencing it very differently, but there's pressure everywhere. So there's just, it feels like more that people have to do the work they were doing before and pivot at the same time and be thinking about the future in a completely uncertain, different way. There is more pressure. So we're dealing with more uncertainty and more pressure. And they're two things that we do have in common generally across the board. And uncertainty, some of the research suggests that uncertainty triggers in our brain as an error message, that we're just not wired for uncertainty, that we really crave a sense of knowing and just that sense of control. And it's not that people don't like change. We do like change and we drive change in our personal lives and in our workplaces. But where we don't have control over that change and we don't know what the changes are, that really impacts us personally. And then, so there's a few things that we can talk about in terms of strategy to help people with that, managing uncertainty. And then I just wanted to pick up on your point around resilience, because, one thing I'm finding, just linking it to the observations, is that people who have maybe never experienced, say, for example, anxiety before, are experiencing it for the first time, and almost being taken by surprise at their emotions, at their at experiencing things like anxiety. And so that can throw people off as well, to think, I'm not like this. I'm someone who rallies, who copes, and suddenly I'm faced with this. And one thing that, I say to my team, and we say to our participants in courses and to clients, is we have to recognize that it's okay not to be okay. And that's really important for leaders as well, to flag that resilience is the ability to bounce back. It's not experiencing these things in the first place. So it's important to recognize for ourselves, if I don't feel okay right now, if I feel really angry, or I feel really sad, or I feel really just anxious, or whatever it is, that's all right. That's not defining you. And that doesn't mean that you're not resilient. It means that you're self-aware and willing to go there and to do the work. And like I said, we can talk through strategies for how to manage things like that. But the first thing I'd say is just this observance that people have, don't judge yourself for not feeling okay.
I'd love to pick you up on that. I think that's such an important point. And I'm sort of thinking about it in the context particularly of couples finding themselves in situations they have never imagined would happen in their lives, that they are both working remotely at home. And I mean, add that to what you just said about, experiencing anxiety and things, people who would never normally have felt that. There they are working together. That creates a tension. It creates an unknown quantity they've never experienced. What would you say in a very practical way can those couples do to help themselves have a kind of healthy outlook? I mean, I'd love you to sort of say a little bit more about the self-awareness thing, because I think that's hugely important.
Yeah, okay. So, one thing that we know is that we need to sit, we call it like sit with your emotions. So it's instinctive to think, in trying to be resilient and trying to get through, that we should just push them away. But actually pushing away, like kind of trying to hold back emotions, actually it doesn't work, and it has the opposite effect to what we intend. So we need to recognize that, emotions are very powerful, and, some of the latest research suggests are key influences in terms of our decision making. So it's not like we have this rational brain where we make all our decisions, and then we have this emotional brain that we just have to hold down. So practically, I'd encourage, first of all, in terms of self-awareness, be mindful of, it comes back to that point around authenticity. Be mindful of what you're thinking, what you're feeling. A useful thing can be journaling when maybe you're not used to doing that. And one piece of advice, I kind of practice what I preach, so to speak, and have my own coach. And he said to me, I only want you to write on one side of the paper, which I was like, oh, that's a waste of paper. But, so instead I drew a line. And then to come back a few weeks later to what you've written and to reflect on that. And that's been a really powerful practice. So that can be helpful. But just to kind of sit with your emotions. So carving out time to go for a walk, just to it sounds so silly, but to think about how you feel, because emotions are actually, I think of them as like pieces of data. They help us to understand ourselves and what we're going through. And it's only if we're doing that, then we're able to communicate that effectively to our spouses, and equally to our teams and to our leaders. And so in terms of self-awareness, I'd say don't try and push away the emotions. But at the same time, it's very important to be mindful. And I think this is important in a season when people are having to take decisions that they maybe didn't even see themselves ever having to make. To know the difference between gathering information, exploring options, weighing up options, and thinking about how you feel, like processing your emotions, and actually taking decisions. Because otherwise what happens is we feel like all of that is about making a decision, and we get what I call decision weight. And so we're always feeling like there's this big thing that we have to decide on, whether that's, our jobs or something to do with our kids, or, how we live, whatever it might be. It feels like a constant, I feel like it's a weight of that decision. So it can be helpful to carve out a time for, okay, when do we need to take this decision by? And until we need to take that decision, everything else is about gathering information, weighing up options, processing how we feel, and just embracing that without the pressure of taking the decision. So that's one of the strategies that's helpful. But there's more things around.
Yeah.
No, that's really helpful.
We'd love to talk a little bit more about this thing of working remotely, which is many people are experiencing, and many for the first time. They've never worked from home before. And in terms of teams working together, when you're not together physically, you know how misunderstandings can arise, how communication through the internet can be harder. Do you have any tips for listening well, for having good communication with other members of your team, perhaps your boss, perhaps the person you're leading, while you're working on your own?
Yes, it's so important for all of us. I mean, you can see I'm here by myself. It's something we're all going through. So there's a few things that we can do. One is to be mindful of the importance of social connection. Okay, so as this isn't just for the leaders, the people in charge of teams. It's for all of us who want to bring out the best in our teams and the best in each other. Perceived social isolation can actually reduce our ability for kind of complex cognitive thinking. It reduces our ability to come up with new ideas, which we all need to do right now. It reduces our ability to manage and process change, the kind of executive functioning. And I say perceived social isolation. So the point is, if people feel, you said right at the beginning, Nikki, about a world of disconnection. And so we have to be more intentional than ever to keep that social connection. And one thing, so like, for example, just with my team on a Monday morning, so we work a kind of Monday to Friday week. On a Monday morning, we have a bigger team meeting, not because we have more to discuss about the week ahead, although we probably do, but also because I've been mindful that we need to chat about the weekend and talk about just life things that are happening. And so carve out longer, I'd say, for team meetings to make sure that you're actively building in social time. And then where you can, we've built in tea time. I didn't drink tea till I moved to England, and then I got off. I'm just giving in. But, like carving out time that is just for social time, or like, once a week having lunch where you're just, chatting the way you would in the canteen or in the cafe. People are doing fun things like quizzes, pub quizzes online and stuff like that. That's, we can't underestimate the importance of that. And actually it has a direct impact on people's ability to do their work really well in this world that is so pressured. So it's not just a nice to have, it's actually the best thing to do if you want to increase team effectiveness and to maintain team performance. So that's some things that you can do. I think the other thing, in terms of virtual working, there is more scope than ever for misunderstanding. I'm always talking about the difference between our intention and our actual impact. We all have this gap. And when we're together, we often pick up on non-verbal cues that we realize that we've done something or said something or haven't done something or said something that has impacted someone in a way we didn't intend. And I think that that's not happening as much. So I guess I'd say carve out time for good open questions, right? So what's most important to you right now? What are you struggling with the most in terms of work, or if you want to talk more broadly than that? Just things like that, carving out time to find out what's going on for other people. I find a really great question. We want to get feedback, but often people are reluctant to give it. So a great question to ask is, what could I do differently for us to be more effective in our relationship and how we're working together? What could I do differently?
That's so helpful.
When the thing is that when you ask that of someone, and you can even ask that of someone that you might be frustrated with or struggling with, if you ask that with genuine interest and genuine curiosity, wanting to understand, wanting to learn, then the other person is also more likely to reciprocate by saying, is there anything I could do? And then you can say, actually, I really appreciate this, and I would appreciate if we could change. So we just need to be better. We need to be skilled. And this is really a leader's responsibility as well, is to make sure that they and their teams are skilled in good conversations, in having difficult conversations well, but also just in carving out more time for those open conversations where people can be vulnerable, can be honest, and is done in a way that it still has positive intention. So giving constructive feedback, I'd say that kind of, they're just some practical points around what good communication looks like.
Really helpful. Thank you, Rebecca. Now, we're aware that there are some people who really thrive through working more on their own, whereas others really miss the stimulation of having other people around, doing sort of, working as a team, the office environment itself. And who knows how the changes in the workplace will come out of this pandemic. But do you think actually giving people more choice as to the balance between working on their own and working together as a team will be a good thing?
Or not. You may say
no. I think flexibility is always a good thing. So I would, we know that some of the research shows that versatility, as in how a leader adapting their style and being mindful of what their team and their people needs and adapting accordingly, is a really strong predictor of leadership effectiveness. So, it's important to be flexible, and at the same time, I'm concerned sometimes that if we, right now in the UK, we're all going into a season of we are all working from home as much as possible, and then some other people and whole teams tend to be going out, the people who can't work from home. I guess the mix sometimes, I think, within teams. So if you have some people who are going to go back into the office and some people who are choosing to work from home, what I'm finding is that my clients who lead businesses and teams are finding best in terms of managing that mix is to make sure that there is some all team time, or that they are just very intentional with making sure that people who are working more remotely are still as engaged with the team, that they're not essentially becoming an island. But to come back to your point, Nikki, about some of us love the interaction and are energized by being with other people, and some people love to work alone and to get on with that. Again, we do lots of profiling of people around things like this so leaders can understand their people. But I just encourage you to observe and to ask people and to ask teams, what would be ideal for you? How do you love to work? And to, what really motivates you? A great question to ask is, when have you last felt really energized in your work? And it's amazing the difference. And you hear these stories, and when people start talking about it, they come alive and they talk about, I love this, and you get to understand each other better. And when you do that, then you're able to flex intentionally and to work with people in a way that brings out their strengths and their energizers.
That's very interesting, very helpful. We were talking to two people not very long ago who lead a big team and various different entities and in an organization. And they were saying, what about this? Well, they're kind of finding it interesting trying to handle the whole accountability thing with people working remotely. And I think that plays into another question that we wanted to ask, which is this thing of how can team building be done effectively when we're in this context, and particularly where you can kind of pick up on what is an unhealthy practice and what's actually energizing and good. And of course, that's a really difficult thing, because actually if someone wants to go out and take their dog for a walk in the middle of the working day because they happen to be at home and have a dog, is that actually something that's going to energize them and be good, or is it going to be counterproductive and they need to be kind of, I don't know.
Well, I think going for a walk is always a good idea, probably, in terms of energy and stuff, regardless of your personality type. I'm laughing because we have 3 little kids who are trying to persuade us
to get a dog.
Yeah. They're winning.
We won't play this to them, Rebecca. Whatever you say.
Okay, so in terms of team building, where we used to go off before, have away days and things like that, or carving out these times, in a world that is virtual, for starters, so how much can we really do, it feels like, and we've got so much pressure. So most, I see a trend of so many organizations just seem to have more work to get done. Those two things combined could make it easy to think we can't carve out time for this. Really, the starting point is carve out time for it. So I think as a leader, you instinctively know I need to do this. I just can't fit it in the diary. Like, how are we going to replicate the social side that normally comes out in December in the lead up to Christmas, where we can't do that? So we have to get creative, think of different ways. Like, lots of teams do fun things on a Friday. But I think it's important to carve out actual work time. So, early on in the week for, say, a half day. I do think a full day on video conferencing is actually exhausting. You don't want people to be de-energized at the end of your team day. But, just the same way that you would build good activities around, maybe some self-development points, some learning points, and then some team dynamics points. Carving out those kind of things for a couple of hours is really important, and I would encourage you to keep doing it. So if you would normally do it offsite, keep going, because what we found at the beginning of the pandemic was everything went on hold in terms of this world of team building type stuff and leadership development in my world. Everything, that first week of March, I think it was for us, it just seemed like everything was just put on hold. We'll do it at some point. And what we're seeing now, certainly in this part of the world, is that we don't know when we'll be able to go back to these type of options, or if ever, some organizations won't go back to that at all. And so much has changed. So I think that we can't, what we know that we need to do as leaders to develop strong and healthy teams, we have to adapt and find ways to do that virtually, because team needs are still there. And what we know from the research is that under pressure, so healthy teams are made up of task needs, the things that need to get done for the team, the things that the individuals need to take away from the team, and in terms of what they get from being a part of the team, and the team dynamic stuff. And under pressure, everything goes to the task. So if you're feeling like that, make sure that you're carving out time, for individual reflection and growth, and for team work and development and growth.
Fantastic.
Really helpful.
Really helpful.
Very practical help. We know that for many people, this season will be a time of looking for a new career. For some, that's because they've been made redundant. For others, it's because of they may have been thinking about this for some time. What would your advice be to someone who is currently rethinking their career path?
I always think that new seasons need new conversations. So if you are considering a shift, like a different career, actively seek out people who are in that field who can give you advice. And maybe I'm biased in this, but I think actually people are very generous with their time and wanting to help each other. And particularly in this season, I in one of our courses yesterday, I heard the words kind of kind and gracious and generous being used more than I ever have. And I think that it's worth just reaching out and asking people, I'm considering stepping into the field that you do. I really respect your work. I wondered if you could give me 10 minutes just to give me some advice about what it looks like, what it feels like, what the opportunities might be, and how to navigate that. And I think that you'll get a positive response. I think one of the things that we need to be careful of is our own kind of sense of confidence. So I'm seeing a lot of people feeling like that their confidence is really knocked from what's going on. And we look at other people and we think that they have so much confidence, and then we can be really down on ourselves for not feeling like that, and for thinking, I don't have their confidence, I can't do what they do, I'm not like them. And it's actually, it can be almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, and being such a negative, it's de-energizing. It means that we don't step out, we don't take risks, we're not knocking on new doors. So I just encourage people to know that, when we interview people who others say they have so much confidence, those people say, no, I don't. I look in the mirror and I give myself a pep talk and I say, you've got this, you can do this, it's okay. And actually what they're doing is choosing to be courageous. So don't worry about whether you're feeling confident and so kind of self-powerful. Don't worry about that. Choose to be courageous, choose to step out, know that, you might get knocked. I mean, I remember early on in my career, I'm sure I used to get more rejection letters than I applied for. I felt like people were just anticipating she's going to apply and say no, and so that sense of resilience is really important. No, if you are choosing to be brave and to step out and to find work and proving that you are willing to learn and to roll your sleeves up and to get in there and to work hard, that people will respond positively to that. And just choose courage. Don't worry about, and the confidence stuff will come. But I often think that, when people are looking to hire, attitude is it's so important to people when they're hiring, and yet we rule ourselves out for not meeting all of the experience or kind of every qualification that is listed. We can rule ourselves out. Women actually in particular have a tendency to do that. And actually what people are looking for is often the right attitude, willingness to learn, growth mindset, commitment to hard work.
That is amazing, because I wanted to come on to really just finish our conversation with you today by asking you, this context we all find ourselves in now is so unsettling, and can kind of, like, for people, feels like the rug's being pulled out from underneath them. What would you say are the values that you would want to impart to people, that you do in the work that you do, that build that sense of security and of resilience and of courage in the face of these kind of challenges? And I know personally for you, faith is an important part of your journey, but the values around what builds these things, I'd love to hear finally what you feel about that.
Yeah. For me, the courage point that I just made is really important, and that no one is excluded from the possibilities that the world offers, or they shouldn't be. And so, and they probably are in reality. So let's make sure, I think that we should be people who are actively giving people opportunities wherever we can. Diversity and inclusion are really important to me, and not just because they're the right things to do, but also when we're talking about business and leadership, we know that they're the best things to do, because diversity creates better teams, you know, and better outcomes. And I also think that in this season, we need to demonstrate kindness and vulnerability and kindness. So being kind and gracious to other people, being vulnerable in not being okay all the time ourselves. And in a season when there is so much pressure and uncertainty, we can want to control everything. We can want to pull things to ourselves to control what we can control. And that's fair enough. And that's our kind of natural instincts. But I guess one thing I'd finish with is, you know, there's some fascinating research that looks at the impact of when you actively seek out and make a difference in other people's lives. And these researchers, they call it coaching with compassion, and you know, all the references are in my book for it that you can look up. But what they found is that, you know, if you carve out that time for focusing on somebody else, for demonstrating empathy, for wanting to help them to move forward and to achieve their goals, that yes, of course, that's a positive experience for the person on the receiving end of that. But actually, for the person who is doing this coaching, and I don't mean formal, you know, that you need to be formalized in that, but that you're the person asking the questions, focusing on someone else, that there are psychological and even physiological changes in our bodies. And those changes are the very things that mitigate what they call power stress, that they actually work against the negative things that come about from the stress that we're experiencing right now. So in a season when we feel the need to pull everything to ourselves, to focus on just buckling down, keep looking up, keep reaching out, keep carving out time for other people, you know, your spouse for starters, and for the people around you that you have the opportunity to influence and to give time to. Just a generous, compassionate, listening ear, wanting to encourage them and help them will actually help you. So do carve out time for other people in that way, and you'll be able to increase your own resilience through this very difficult, complex season.
That's an amazing, amazing piece of advice to end on, because that completely counters people being isolated and being overwhelmed. And it's a wonderful, wonderful piece of wisdom. So, Rebecca, thank you very, very much for giving us this time. It's been fascinating. I'd love to go on for another however long we've been, because I know you are full of lots more advice, but that's really exciting because it's all in your book. So encouraging anybody who has been listening to get Rebecca's book, and you'll find all the details on the website.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Rebecca.
Bye.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Bye.